Antigonish is a rural coastal community with a global conscience, a rich cultural heritage, and a strong connection to the cooperative movement. The local economy relies on an undergraduate university, a regional hospital, and fishing, forestry, and farming. Many residents are concerned about climate change and its impacts on our health, on the health of the land and sea, and on the health of our children and grandchildren. We want to do something about it. There is wisdom all around us.
My research is based on greenhouse gases and the effect of climate change on soil organisms that will degrade organic matter. So we're at all sorts of sites measuring that process and seeing how that's accelerated with enhanced warming of the planet. So basically you have a situation where enhanced warming warms up soils, which releases more greenhouse gas to the atmosphere.
This sea has a way of fixing me to the hills that roll green and roll. And as I live and as I breathe, my tough old heart stays rocky like the shore.
All things share the same breath, the beast, the tree, the man. The air shares its spirit with all life it supports.
So I talk about greenhouse gases, but do you know what a greenhouse gas is?
Kind of.
Yeah? Well, they act as a blanket on the Earth. They stop the heat from going back out to space.
And as I live and as I breathe, my tough old heart stays rocky like the shore.
And it's kind of ironic that the provincial tree isn't going to make it with climate change. We're looking at extremes, which seems to be what climate change is, in part is bringing, that deeper-rooted trees will be able to survive when the water table descends. This kind of forest with 48 different species of trees is going to be much more able to withstand the extremes. And in the case of the 56 acres here, it's transitioning from trash to very valuable species. The shade is going to mitigate the heat. The forest is going to actually help the soil. And the whole thing is heading for a better, more moderate climate. And of course, we live in the coast, and that's a great asset here. I think woodlot owners could start thinking long-term if government and pulp companies can't. It's one of the reasons we take tours here on the property, because it's been 40 years of it here, and we're not perfect, but it's heading in a much better direction, so that if climate change and really dry summers, or the kind of winter we've just had with massive amounts of snows, there's not a whole issue here anymore. It's funny, I had a group one day, and I took them over here, and I started talking about flying squirrels, and I looked in a hole, and one looked out. But everybody else would say, oh, well, this is how I cut my firewood. Those two trees have been around for years. Limbs keep falling off because the eagles keep coming here. There's an eagle nest back there, too. Just old poplars. They grow fast and they die fast, but they have a role, too. You know, one of the things that's happened with this property is that it's still not a great forest, but it's the best thing left. So we wind up with a higher proportion of wildlife displaced from the surrounding area, who winds up in here, and the goshawks are really just, it's the best place they can find. And it's right next to the eagle nest, and it's near the barred owl nest, of all things. So I think if people actually have respect for nature and are willing to do something on their own properties, they're going to get paid in spades. We'll invest in Exxon, we'll invest in all these other things. I've been investing in what I live in because I think eventually there's going to be a profit here. When you look around, some of these trees are going to be very valuable, but it does take time, and short-term profits are not part of the picture.
Good for the season, did you? Or?
Delayed.
Yeah.
Because of the ice. The water was cold at the start and lobsters were moving, but the biggest positive was once the water warmed up and they started to move around, the catches were pretty decent, and the price really helped a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a nice change.
Yeah.
The water stayed pretty cool.
The last day it was 50 degrees.
52.
On the last day, yeah.
With a 2-month lobster season, one of the concerns were this year we got delayed, and it's going to probably down the road when the time grace gets into the fishery. You know,
Yeah, it might come down to like a 6-week season or something, you know. We get pushed in by the ice, and then
Exactly.
pushed out by the sun.
Yeah,
that's true.
exactly.
Hard to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
That's
we had
it.
heavy ice, heavy snowfall this winter created our delay, and that's going to be more than norm.
Especially when I'm into it later. Like, for a fishery that depends so much on weather,
Yeah.
there could be a lot of variables if things start getting really sporadic. You get a huge storm and then...
We've always lived close to the land or the sea or whatever, so we were probably most aware of the effects. Yeah, like salmon have just taken, with these big episodic lows, the 1 in 100 year storms are 1 in 10 years now. The winter before, where we had all the snow, then January we had, was it 30 millimeters of rain on top of the ice? So what that would do is it went under the ice, popped it, and then just made a huge flood down, right? That destroyed pretty much that whole year class of salmon.
Yeah,
So that's not good.
we used to have a strong mackerel fishery here.
Yeah.
The mackerel, we feel, are going further north now. They're searching out probably cooler waters, right?
Yeah, because it seems like the little fish go after the temperature, and the big fish follow the little fish.
Yeah,
So it's all temperature related.
everything's
Yeah.
temperature related.
Yeah.
With Grace, the next generation coming up, I don't want to talk gloom and doom either, but at
No.
least as an industry we should be aware of it and whatever we can do about it.
But that's what's good about around here, that you guys do look after your fishery. You know, management-wise, like I worked for 33 years or something doing resource protection in all over the West and all over. And this is about the only place that I've seen where the fishermen really are at the front of it, you know.
Yeah.
They're at the front pulling DFO.
When you depend on the environment for your livelihood, that makes you a pretty strong environmentalist.
Climate change is probably one of, if not the biggest health issue that we're facing right now, and things like heat-related illnesses. We're seeing more of that. People are becoming ill, people are dying, especially in other parts of the world. We're seeing more extreme weather events, so those are things like tornadoes and floods and even fires, and so all of those have health impacts. You know, they can cause injuries, they can cause mental health impacts, even things like heart disease, lung problems. Those get made worse when there's more ozone in the air, and we see that happening with climate change. So we know people are already becoming more ill. We are seeing more Lyme disease in places in Canada where it hadn't been before. So as areas get warmer, we do see more of the ticks that are associated that carry Lyme disease. So in Nova Scotia, we are starting to see that as time goes on and as climate change, you know, gets worse. But hopefully we can do things to prevent that from happening.
Do you know where that coal comes from that we burn in Nova Scotia? A lot of it?
The ground.
Yeah, it comes from the ground. But do you know whose ground? No. No, it's a really far away place.
Alberta.
Farther. Argentina. Most of our
Whoa.
coal is mined.
Wow.
So when you turn off the power, you don't just...
You turn off the truck.
Yeah, you turn off the truck that comes from Argentina.
We moved here 12 years ago. PV was still out of our price range, but we thought, well, might as well site the house, you know, so that it's an option. And sure enough, you know, 8 years later, it became very affordable.
But a solar system is something that will pay back, that is only that price, you know what I mean? It's not extravagant or anything like that. It is a mechanical in the house, you know, and people are spending $30,000 to $40,000 for a geothermal and still paying power after
And still
that.
paying power,
Why not
exactly.
pay that and not pay power? You know what I mean? So with you and with other people, it's in your head then. You're thinking, well, you know what? I've got a power production facility on my roof that's making this much power a year. I need to fit my life into that, and you exceeded that and fitted even, you know, you even have less power consumption now because of your, you know, just thinking about what you're doing in the world and in the climate.
That first year, I remember at the end of the year, it's like, oh, well, it did exactly what Brian said it was going to do in terms of power production, but I kind of feel like I want more. You're making your own energy, so you're really cognizant of the fact of what it's costing and how you're using it. And that was key.
That's why it's power to the people.
That's why it's power to the people.
Climate is a big deal in farming. I mean, weather can make or break you in this business. It all adds to the risk of farming. This month, it's been quite cold out, and that's quite hard on crops that require heat. We grow a lot of corn and a lot of alfalfa forage, and you know, a little bit of heat is good, but on the other side of the business, the livestock, they don't like the heat much at all, so. That methane now is just released into the atmosphere when we spread the manure, right? And that's that country odor that you always smell in the springtime driving through Antigonish County. Capturing the methane gas that is produced from our dairy cows and our manure, and using that gas to power methane generators, and that from there will generate green electricity.
Insurance is a shared proposition. So the masses come together and put money in a pool, and that money is paid out in claims, and that's how our rate is determined. So obviously, more and more claims that are presented, and larger claims, is going to impact us all in terms of premium increases over the years. Most people now are seeing things in the news, they're seeing things about climate change, but when it comes down to your actual claim itself, your own personal claim, emotion gets involved. I think you tend not to look then and say, what's the connection between my claim and climate change? Flooding is not covered under most homeowners' policies. So when water comes in through windows and doors, that's considered flood as opposed to sewer backup. And so those situations can be pretty tough in terms of people understanding what coverage they do have. We're seeing winters that didn't show up until February, when normally it would come in October. They don't leave until May. We're seeing lots of water damage as well as they have in other places. So all these things all impact our industry in terms of you know, more claims being paid out, causing premiums to rise.
So living near the coast, though, who do you think is going to be impacted the most?
All the cottages right near the ocean. Probably gonna get flooded. The water's expanding.
We should allow a lot of building around the ocean?
Probably not. More inland.
So we think of sea level rise as moving up. Okay.
Yeah.
But every time sea level raises up, there's probably a 1 to 10 factor in terms of eroding the land or the vegetation adjacent to the sea.
Yeah.
When I really began focusing on Antigonish Harbor and some of the related estuaries, salt marshes were collapsing. than that they were eroding really quickly. And I first saw this out in Pomket Harbor and then here. And that's really what we're seeing all around Antigonish Harbor and all around Nova Scotia. And part of that is human-induced. I mean, clearly climate change and human-induced climate change is a big factor here. And I think one of the problems in Nova Scotia is there's very little regulation in terms of what you can build where.
We weren't told, you know, set back your house so far. And what we thought, we tried to be responsible. We were hoping what we were doing is right. And we've learned more as we've gone along. So we've tried to keep our property biodiverse because I feel a great responsibility about that. We actually prefer what some people would call a Zen view, but it's a different kind of view through the trees to the water. And then you can also selectively cut a few branches off your trees and that kind of thing to make it really beautiful. And then there are a lot of other species that live in there, so you've got a really interesting view as well.
What we've done is we're using hay bales mixed with the eelgrass, and we've got these locked in and then staked with hardwood. So for our shoreline, we're going to go with 2 to 3 bales high, and we're going to bale this summer. The plants will get stronger all along the coast, and this will act as a sponge and basically protect the piece of coast we want to protect.
If you go down the shore where we are at, it's much more traumatic. But we used to have a rose hedge that was just there, and we didn't cut it, so it just grew and grew. And one morning we woke up and it was gone. A big section of it was just gone. Wow. And it kind of hurt my heart a lot.
You're probably losing, 10 centimeters, half a meter every year. Yeah. There's nothing we can do about it. I mean, and even if we could control climate change, the land here is sinking as a consequence of glaciation. We can't stop everything, but we can certainly slow down these processes.
Here's a question for you. Do you think that somebody who lives in town emits more greenhouse gas or somebody who lives in the country?
Someone who lives in town. Probably. Who lives in the country.
I guess I haven't been the best role model because I do live out here and people do see me driving a truck and that kind of thing. And I feel somewhat embarrassed about that, actually, that I spend a lot of my work life doing greenhouse gas reduction projects and don't do them a lot at home, as much as I should. But I should be, I think, for example, sending Nia on the bus more often and riding my bike to town.
You can take action that has a number of different benefits and addresses climate change. So an example is work around active transportation. So if we can get people walking and biking and not using their car so much, it's good for their health, and it also helps impact climate change.
One of the challenges for us is to begin to move our Catholic tradition of social justice to include not only humans, but everything that lives and everything that exists. And so growing in awareness ourselves that maybe one of the poorest, most oppressed right now is Earth itself. The encyclical is marvelous. He's identified climate change as a crisis and as a human-made crisis. He subtitled it, Caring for Our Common Home. So the invitation was to Catholics, but it was to also people of all faith and to all people because we have this one common home. What was key as I was reading through the encyclical is the awareness that nobody has all the answers, that this crisis is bigger than us separately. The absolute need for dialogue, for respect for what every person brings, every perspective that's brought.
There's lots of work happening around here around food security. If we can improve our access to local food and local food sustainability, it's not only good for our communities, but it also helps because we're already seeing food shortages in many parts of the world because of drought, because of fire, because of different things, and that's going to impact us because we import most of our food as much as we try to grow locally. People often might not think about climate change if they think of it as an environmental issue, an economic issue, something that's a bit abstract. But when you make it a health issue, it really resonates with people.
So If you cut down that rhubarb and bring it to a local restaurant and they make something delicious with it, is that better than them getting rhubarb from elsewhere?
Yeah. Plus, it's local.
Yeah. That's it. We've definitely been inspired by this young market gardener in Quebec, Jean-Martin Fortier, and he does this incredible system of very quick turnovers and intensive use of land, but still using all hand tools and, you know, on a really small scale, but manages to make a very decent living. Like, we still like to keep it small, just to keep it manageable. So we have 20 customers, and then we do the farmers market Saturday mornings, and then we sell to the Townhouse restaurant. It's always been, I don't want to say easy, but kind of, to sell produce in Antigonish. And again, we're on a smallish scale, but that's how we want to keep it. I think one of the big things we've noticed is not being able to rely on rainfall, and because that's in fact what we did for the first 4 years of our gardening experience, was to depend on collecting rainwater and using that for irrigating the garden. Last year especially just kind of put the nail on the coffin with that system. It was so dry, there was such a drought that we had to quickly install a pump to our pond. So we have a gas pump now. Oh. Well, what do you think? Is that enough to share?
Yeah. There's really big ones.
Mm-hmm.
There's a spider in here.
You all right, Jules? You getting some strawberries? You got one for Da?
There is a lot of awareness in general in the community about the way food is produced and the way it's being distributed. And many people would have either grown up on a farm or had some connection to a farm. The way I felt I could be active and political about my motives in terms of the environment and climate change was vote with my dollar and buy food that I thought reflected a responsibility to climate change and to the environmental problems we're facing. Probably why I got into growing food is because I realized that's the best way to get involved is to grow it myself. And then, you know, the added bonus of providing what I consider sustainably grown food to my local community. The more I traveled and kind of learned about the environmental issues we're facing and climate change more specifically, I realized I had to just start at home. Being aware of how the food is being produced, how far it's coming from, there's a big security in knowing all of that. It is important for people to make that connection of who you are and where you're farming. And I know for myself when I'm buying food, I like to know the story behind it too.
We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children.
Sometimes love has a way of being nothing and everything you want. Chances come to turn on your heels, but your feet won't let you leave. This sea has a way of fixing me to the hill.